Toads and Roses. "Hello, Bianca," the wizard said as he walked through the sitting room door. He was old and fat and rich, and smelled of horrid things. Pickled frog's eyes, perhaps. His hair was greasy and white, and he wore black from head to toe. Bianca resisted the urge to scoot closer to her sister Esmeralda on the couch, and shivered, but not from the cold. She cast her eyes down to be demure, staring at her dress, blue silk and lace. Esmeralda's dress was dark and brown, like the wood paneling on the walls, but not as nice as Bianca's. Bianca felt guilty about that. She didn't know why her parents liked her best. Next to Bianca, Esmeralda raised an eyebrow. Bianca saw it out of the corner of her eye and tried not to smile. He might think she was smiling at him. She looked into the fireplace instead. It was stone, with a metal tripod over the fire. "Esmeralda's the oldest," their father said, pulling his shirt down in a nervous gesture. He was a tall, thin man, and his clothes didn't fit very well. "She should marry first." The two sisters exchanged a glance. Esmeralda had a hint of defiance starting behind an otherwise bland expression. Something in the set of eyebrows and the tilt of her mouth. "Can you make an exception?" the wizard asked. "I feel that Bianca and I have a special bond. Don't you?" Bianca looked at the wooden floor, being very careful not to raise her eyes. Her back and shoulders were tensing from the effort of sitting still. Beside her, Esmeralda said, "The two of you have never exchanged a word." "Don't be silly," the wizard said. "We're exchanging words right now." Bianca said nothing. She tried not to move or react. "Aren't we, my little dove?" the wizard prompted. "No," Esmeralda said. "You're talking, but she's not answering." "I'm not talking to you," he said, his voice dismissive. He knelt down near Bianca, who tried not to cringe away from him. It would be rude. He moved into her line of vision. She looked away at his shoes. "Come now, my dove. Tell your parents you feel the connection too." Bianca stammered. She didn't think he would leave until she said something, so she said, "I'm sorry, my lord, but I wouldn't presume to say that I have any connection to a man with whom I've never spoken." The wizard pulled back and then stood, a line creasing between his eyes and the line of his mouth hardening. Esmeralda smirked and raised an eyebrow at him. "Esmeralda's the oldest," their father repeated. "She should marry first. You can marry her if you wish." Bianca couldn't tell who was more displeased by that statement, Esmeralda or the wizard. "What if I provided Bianca's dowry myself?" the wizard asked. "Would that make a difference?" "Esmeralda's the oldest," their father repeated, but he didn't say it with a lot of confidence. "I'll provide them both with the dowry they deserve," the wizard said. "She can't help it," Bianca said, rising from the couch. A perfect white rose fell from her mouth, blood staining the petals. She wiped the blood from her lips and spat out a diamond. A single drop of blood landed on the bodice of her gown. Esmeralda crossed her arms and raised her eyebrows, but said nothing, which Bianca thought was probably a good thing. "Please," Bianca said, and coughed. A large emerald fell from her lips, cold and hard against the cuts from the thorns. "Please, let my sister stay. I'll do anything." This time, an enormous bouquet of roses fell out. It hurt, a large thorny bunch forcing its way out of a too small mouth and throat. "Hush, Bianca," their father said. "Don't strain yourself." Bianca sighed. That was how standing up for Esmeralda always went. Their father turned to Esmeralda. "Esmeralda, you must sleep in the stables from now on. You're no longer welcome in this home." Esmeralda said, "No," and walked towards the door. A snake fell on the ground after her. The snake rose and hissed at her father. He skittered away backwards and grabbed the poker. Bianca jumped up onto the couch, although the snake didn't seem interested in her. Their father beat the snake with the poker, but that didn't drown out the sound of the door closing behind Esmeralda. "It's all right," their father said. "You're a good girl, so nothing bad will happen to you." The wizard's house was full of rich carpets, wall hangings, and expensive furniture. Bianca stood there in her wedding dress and wished she could go back home. Go anywhere. Go to the stables where father had wanted to send Esmeralda. Anywhere but here. She shuddered as the wizard pulled her into his arms. He was leering, and he smelled like he'd been working in the stables. Disused stables, full of manure and dead horses. She tried to push him away, but he was slippery with sweat. "Come here, my little dove," he said. His hands groped roughly at her, crushing her breast, and his mouth covered hers. He tasted like alcohol and old meat. Bianca tried to say no, but instead she coughed up a hard, round stone. She spat it into his mouth and hoped he choked on it. He stopped long enough to pull the opal out of his mouth with a smile, then grabbed her by the hair, shoved her back against the front door, and hiked her skirts. Esmeralda wrapped her dark cloak around her and pulled her hood over her short-cropped hair. Her hair was one of the few things she had been willing to sell. She stepped out into the alley and started walking back to the inn, stepping around the horse droppings. The alley smelled of manure and urine. "What do we have here?" a male voice asked from the shadows. Esmeralda turned and saw 3 men in mud-spattered clothes coming towards her, laughing. One man had a scar across his face, pulling his mouth up into a sneer. Or maybe that was really his expression, and not the scar. "Go away," she said, and scorpions leapt towards the men. One man swore. The man with the scar stepped forward again, and she said, "I mean it." A poisonous snake landed in front of him, and he backed away quickly. "Witch!" they muttered among themselves as they left. Esmeralda turned on her heel and marched down the street to the inn. She wondered how much weapons cost. If she had enough money, she could defeat the wizard with steel when he had spells. She had to try. She had to rescue Bianca. Bianca had told her husband it hurt too much to speak, but he wasn't interested in anything she had to say anyway. Besides, he always took her gemstones or flowers away. Sometimes he hit her, too, if he didn't like what she said. Esmeralda would never let a man strike her. "Esmeralda," she whispered, and produced a large diamond. Since there was no one there to see her, she pulled up a floorboard and hid it in the growing cache of gemstones. Tonight, she would end it. Esmeralda climbed up the outside of the building by the light of the lamp in the upstairs window. It cast any handholds or toeholds into shadow and made her less visible. Reaching the window, she peered over the sill. No one was visible, so she climbed inside. There was a dim light under the door at the end of the hall. "Bianca," the wizard's voice called from the room. "Come in here right now." Bianca stepped out from behind a door, bruised and tear-stained, with one of her hands behind her back. She started when she saw Esmeralda, but Esmeralda quickly put a finger over her lips in a shushing gesture. Esmeralda opened the door. "What is this?" He started towards Esmeralda, raising his hand. "I'm here for your wife," Esmeralda said. A cobra fell out of her mouth. He screamed as the cobra lashed out, biting him on the face. Bianca came into the room and watched her husband gasp for air. She placed a large knife on the dressing table and crossed her arms. Esmeralda smiled, approving. Together they watched as the wizard's face welled like a monster in a fairy tale. Esmeralda hadn't thought he could get uglier, but he did. He collapsed to his knees. "Bianca!" he gasped. "Help me!" Bianca said nothing. She just watched him fall onto his side, gasping and wheezing. Then he kicked and clutched at his throat. Bianca then gestured to Esmeralda and led her downstairs to the loose floorboard and the gemstones hidden there. They scooped them up and put them in their purses. "You should pack," Esmeralda said, Frogs hopping away. The sisters took 2 of the wizard's horses and rode away.